Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Borough of Carlisle's workshop meeting for July 1st, 2020. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And first on the agenda, citizens to be heard. Is there anyone joining us either online or in person who would like to address council on a specific matter of borough government? Yeah, please. You'll just, yeah, that's fine. Or the podium. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. And then you guys.
And if you can just give us your name and address for the record.
Of course. So my name is Sarah Markowitz. I currently live at 137 F Street here in Carlisle, PA. And so I have a few comments. So first, I just want to say it's really great to live in a town that has such progressive and forward-thinking borough council members and just a borough council in general. I really like a lot of the things they've been working on, especially recently with getting the signs changed. So the walk signals changed. You don't have to push the button, at least in the square. I think that's really nice, especially during the pandemic. And I really like the idea of the open container law being lifted as well. And I just wanted to express that I'd really like to see that extend. I don't think we've seen the town turn into a chaotic, drunken, disorderly place in the past couple of weeks. And I think for the remainder of the pandemic, at least, that's been a lifesaver to bars and restaurants, as far as I can tell. The other thing I wanted to bring up too was there was a little bit of discussion about having more open public spaces and kind of rethinking how we're using our public spaces. And so I just wanted to ask if it would be possible to bring back the block parties that used to occur. And I think over certain decades, there were different iterations of these block parties, but essentially shutting down High Street or Hanover Street for businesses to use and do their business outside. Again, with the pandemic, I think this could be really helpful. And I think it's an opportunity for us as well. I feel like if we can do it for the car shows, we can do it for a short, at least amount of time. And I think it's also, again, good for local businesses and encourages people to walk around and enjoy the downtown, at least in a safer way than just using the sidewalk spaces right now. And then finally, my other question was about the budget for this year. I didn't have a ton of time, honestly, to look over it. Very big document, as you know. I was curious about, there was an increase in the amount of ammunition provided to Carlisle Police Department. So in 2017, it was $15,641. Then it rose to roughly $17,000 in 2018. And then there was a $10,000 increase in 2019, up to $27,220. And then for 2020, it slightly decreased to $26,389. And so I was wondering if, I'm just curious, why the increase? And also, if perhaps, because again, I was just curious. So I called a local ammunition shop today, and roughly for $30 of a brick of rounds, which your average brick can be 250 rounds, 500 rounds, or 1,000 rounds. For 250 rounds of 22 ammunition, it's $30 a brick, which seems pretty inexpensive to me. So with $26,000, you can buy 879 bricks, which breaks down to 219,908 bullets, which at 33 police officers, that's about 6,663 bullets per officer, and then that would be 18 rounds per police officer per day, 365 days a year, basically, which seems like a lot in a small town like Carlisle. And I understand that might be part of training, and I saw there was $20,000 allotted in training, So I was also curious about the training as well. Is that outside of training, or is that included in the training costs? And then also, I mean, in this budget, I think it would be really beneficial for our community to have a database where we can keep track of police misconduct, we can keep track of use of force, particularly deadly force. Because right now it's almost impossible to find that information. We've had police officers from the Carlisle Borough fired over allegations that they made. And then that same police officer went and worked down the street at Mount Holly Springs Police Department. And that seems a little odd that you could be fired from a police department and then be hired at another police department just down the road. I mean, it's not even, what, 15 miles away? It would be really nice to know more about that. And then finally, one last thing I'd really like to know about is there was one police officer in particular who was able to retire in 2018, named Christopher Collier. And so I'm curious about Christopher Collier because he was indicted on a federal grand jury with 22 charges. And so he was able to retire in 2018. So I'm wondering how long we were paying for someone who was charged, again, by a federal grand jury of charges including bribery and defrauding our local police department and basically abuse of power. I mean, he was sex trafficking, literally exchanging sexual favors and drugs for more favorable sentences and outcomes. And so I think it's kind of crazy that our taxpayer money is going to fund someone's pension who has been convicted of such crimes. I find that very problematic, and I think others probably find that pretty problematic as well. Sorry, I know that was a lot, so good.
Okay. Thank you very much for those comments. In order for us to get you some of the answers, we're more than happy to get your email address, and staff will follow up with you to answer those questions. But we do appreciate the comments. And just
I think some of those comments might, or some of those answers might be good to put out on our page. I mean, I think since it's in public comment, other people listening could very well want to hear that as well. So
absolutely. Yeah, what Councilor Landis is referring to, we're working on a Q&A in which we hope to answer all, if not most, of the questions that people have about the police department and their operations. And I understand that that is forthcoming. Is that correct, Madam Manager?
It is, yes, sir. It's in the final stages, actually. We were hoping that we could announce when we plan to launch that onto the website this evening, but it's not quite there yet. So okay. We hope to have that up and ready to go next week sometime, but it'll certainly be promoted that it's out there for everyone's review. Okay. And we encourage people to contact us with additional questions, or if they require additional clarification on any of those responses that they'll see to the questions posed to date.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Stephanie Gilbert.
Yeah, hi everybody. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk to you tonight. I am the president, as many of you know, of Destination Carlisle, which is an all-volunteer grassroots merchant organization in the downtown. And today we launched the second year of our bucket list. And the bucket list, basically, some of you are familiar, some of you are not, it includes this year 50 tasks that people can do in downtown. Those tasks range from finding historical landmarks to walking around town and using your open container law and having an icy slushy or something like that as they walk around, to going to particular businesses and completing various tasks. And it launched today at noon, and we already have people doing it. We already have the photos showing up on our social media. And so we just wanted to, let council be aware. We also emailed council and some borough officials the list, as well as links to the website And I know some of you did do some of the tasks last year. I think both the Seans did some of the tasks and went ahead and posted those. And, since we have no budget, word of mouth is really how we get people to participate and know about the bucket list. And it's just something, I think it's even more important this year than it was last year, since people are trying to get used to going back out into town and the businesses are just getting their feet underneath them. So, just wanting to let everyone know in the borough and also in borough government that the summer bucket list is available. You can get it at destinationcarlisle.org and have fun. That's it.
Thank you, Stephanie. I know that when that was done last summer, a lot of people participated and they really enjoyed it. So I'm
Yes.
sure all of us here are happy that it is back. So thank you and Destination Carlisle for all your work with that.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Also, really quick, just something that Sarah had mentioned that we didn't actually touch on, and I don't actually have additional information on, and I would like to maybe follow up, is the closing of the street. I know that Harrisburg has done it on 2nd Street just on Saturday nights. It was something we talked about, but I also am not sure where we are on that, so it doesn't have to be an answer right now, but I don't know if we get some update on if that's something that we're still entertaining or if businesses are interested or anything like that. So it would be something to, just wanted to follow up that I would like to know as well.
Okay. All right. I'm sure Susan's taking notes and we'll follow up with you and all of us on the status of that. All right.
If I could jump in real quick to address
Absolutely.
a couple of things that Ms. Markowitz mentioned. And I think we all probably feel the same way about the open container ordinance. And as long as things keep going as well as they have been, I don't see why we would ever change back. So I'm just going to put that out there. The other issues that she mentioned about Detective Collery, I think at least one of those questions we can answer pretty succinctly. That Detective Collery was not on our payroll by the time he had been charged. So he wasn't being paid by the borough. He has been receiving his pension. There's a I believe it's called the Pension Forfeiture Act that only applies when someone is convicted or pleads guilty to certain crimes. And I don't know the ins and outs of that act right off the top of my head. But that's something that could come into play at some later date.
All right. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further comments? All right, we'll move on. I'll entertain a motion to approve the June 3rd, 2020 workshop meeting minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Deb Fulham Winston. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Schultz. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. And now we'll move on to Mayor's report. Staff will give updates on recovery strategies, CDBG 5 stimulus, V actually, and financial impact summary. Susan?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. So the first bullet point, as we stated, are the recovery strategies that Borough Council has endorsed over the past several weeks, and with respect to small business, but as well as implementation of strategies throughout COVID to soften the blows to our taxpayers and ratepayers of the Borough of Carlisle. So I just thought this would be a good opportunity once again to recap where we're at, the status of each, and I can also go into Brenda's question with respect to street closures. The open container lift certainly has been successful to date. We have not had issues related to that lift, whether that be littering, whether that be inebriation or any other associated issues with it. So we, staff is fully supportive of continuing that and continuing to evaluate it and bring back any challenges that or concerns that are posed with our office. But to date, it's been going well. Actually, I was out last weekend and someone approached me who stated they weren't necessarily in favor of it when it first occurred, but now they see it's not too bad. So we'd like to we believe we should continue that. The sidewalk cafes, I think everyone, if you go through the streets, especially on a Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday, you're able to see that a number of our retailers and restaurants have taken advantage of the flexibility that we've provided with respect to the sidewalks and use of sidewalks, that essentially it's not just contained to the footprint of your personal sidewalk. If you have the ability and to expand outside of your footprint and have the approval of the adjacent businesses, you're more than welcome to do so. And I know that's been very much welcomed, and I think, you know, well attended by the patrons of the businesses as well. They enjoy that. The silver meters in downtown, those are designated as the prime parking areas of the borough. We are looking and launched a press release earlier with respect to having the silver meters enforced beginning Monday, July 6th. And however, the gold meters on your secondary streets, as well as the parking garage, will remain free for residential and employee parking. Incentives again to utilize those secondary streets and the parking garage in order to free those silver metered prime parking spaces up for business purposes. So again, we've asked the DCA and others to please try to continue to get the word out. I know that that Stephanie has done a fine job on social media to try to get the word out, and I believe we've even posted it to Nextdoor because we want our residents that live downtown to know that we're ramping the operation back up. The moratorium on residential parking enforcement for street sweeping, we are getting close where we're going to have to probably go back to some sort of enforcement measures there. The more, what we are encouraging is the more that people can still comply with the street sweeping schedule and to move your vehicle elsewhere for that street sweeping. If you can get your neighbors to assist and comply, the more we can sweep along the curbs, probably the longer we can extend this moratorium. But there are areas of the town that are starting to see collection of litter and debris. And as we know, what happens with that during a large rain, that will collect around the stormwater basins, which then has a residual impact on the streets and the collection system. So again, the more we can pass the word off to our residents, please do your best to try to move your vehicle on those days so that our street sweeper can get into the curbs. The longer we can allow this moratorium to stay in place. Trash bags, we continue to entertain and welcome sales of trash bags online for residents that don't feel comfortable going into stores, patronizing stores at this time. So you are welcome to still go online or to call our reception desk for those. The utility billing area, as you recall, there's a moratorium placed on penalties assessed on utility bills at this time, as well as termination of service. Town Hall is now open, limited access, but we welcome those customers to come in and speak to us to set up a nice flexible payment plan if you find that you're in arrears and you need assistance in helping to figure out a payment plan to pay on your utility bill. So feel free to call and we'll gladly assist you. Parks continue to be used and for commercial purposes, and that seems to be going over well. And our park and recreation programming, that is ramping up. We have summer programming at Schaefer Park right now that will transition to Stewart Community Center in the very near future. CARES will likely transition out no later than July 6th. And we continue to stay in contact with Beth Kemp. She is exploring options with the local churches and so forth to go back to the former structure until such time that she can find a permanent or temporary shelter operation for her clients. And we continue to work with our DCA chamber and others on reopening plans. And so we encourage everyone to continue to, look for those emails, look for those social media posts by way of Destination Carlisle, DCA, the chamber, the borough, when reopening downtown. I know that the question was posed on street closures. Initially, there seemed to be a lot of interest in that by the businesses. We haven't heard as much lately on closure of the major thoroughfares. There is some work that goes into closing down the High and Hanover. As we know, those are state roads. They require PennDOT approval as well. And essentially traffic control and other items that would need to be fleshed out. We welcome those ideas. The last that I spoke to DCA, and I don't know if Glenn is on here currently, we just put that somewhat on hold in order to see how the sidewalk cafes went and to see if there was a need for that or a desire for that. So we certainly will entertain it. We did have one person that reached out to us just recently with respect to closure of a secondary street. Those are much easier to accomplish for events than the main thoroughfares, but we'd welcome it for if that is what the small business community in downtown feels is right to do, and weigh the merits of it. So that's it with respect to where we're at with recovery strategies. The CDBG-V, which is the stimulus dollars that the Borough of Carlisle was awarded. We were awarded a small pocket of money that the Borough Council approved earmarking the large majority of it, $150,000, to grants for small businesses. And we up-channeled that to HUD, and we are now waiting on HUD's approval. HUD has up to 45 days to review and comment, but however, we do know that this is a priority for them. There will be an application process to go through that CADIC will be our underwriter for those applications. And there is a grant relief committee that will also review those. And I know 2 members of council, along with a banker, former business owner, and I'm trying to think there's someone else that's involved on that, will be reviewing those as well. And we'll be fleshing still out the final details on what that process looks like over the course of the next 2 weeks.
Excuse me. This is Joel. Just would you even be able to guess when you think you might be ready to take applications at this point? I know we're waiting for HUD, but what is the best case time frame that you would think we might be ready?
Right. Well, what we hope to do, Joel, is actually have those applications ready to roll as soon as we get HUD approval. So, we're fleshing out the final details of it, and our hope is that we'll have it all finalized. You as council, or at least the loan review committee, will have had an opportunity to review those applications. We're trying to make those as easy as possible, easy as far as accessibility to the application, as well as the required documents that will be required to be submitted with it. And because we know this is a very trying time for small businesses and people don't have a lot of time to sit down with countless volumes of paperwork to go through. So I think you're going to see that in the next week and a half.
Great. I think you answered my question. So it sounds like we are actually going to wait for HUD's approval before we take out. Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. And it's on a related note, but we have no involvement in it. Our stimulus dollars should not be, there is another application that is being launched by the county. And I believe that information was disseminated to nonprofits and others this week. So that is a totally different program outside of the borough's purview. So I just didn't want any misunderstanding there by the public on that. And with that being said, Mayor, I thought also that this would be an ideal time if Chief Snyder is on. I'm not sure. Yes, he is on. And he wanted to give a brief update on today's order by the governor with respect to face masks.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. There's been a lot of interest in that, so we welcome your update.
Good evening. So today, the Secretary of Health released a new order covering face coverings, which require universal face coverings. It's a 5-page document, but briefly, it has 5 categories where face coverings should be required. Basically, it's outdoor activities where you're unable to consistently maintain a distance of 6 feet from individuals who are not members of the household. For riding on, driving, or operating a public transportation, or while in a taxi, private car, or ride-sharing vehicle. You're obtaining services from some type of healthcare sector, not limited to hospitals, pharmacies, medical clinics. And then you're engaged in a work activity, a work off-site, and you're interacting with persons or members of the public. And there is also some exceptions. There are 5 exceptions, which basically, if you have a medical condition, respiratory illness, if you're wearing a mask that would basically create some type of unsafe working condition, you physically can't remove the mask, you're under the age of 2, or you're trying to communicate with somebody that has some type of disability, and you are not required to show any documentation for the exceptions. So that's the latest that was released today from the Secretary of Health. So dealing with COVID, it's an ongoing situation, and I've monitored that as much as I can this week on face pieces and testing. And also, since we're dealing with emergency management, the concerns of fireworks for this weekend. I've asked Stephanie to post what the restrictions are on the use of fireworks, which basically says they cannot be ignited or discharged on public or private property without permission. They cannot be discharged from a motor vehicle, which we had last year in Carlisle. They cannot be discharged towards a motor vehicle or building. They cannot be discharged within 100 feet of an occupied structure, whether or not a person is actually present. And you cannot discharge them while under the influence of alcohol, controlled substance, or other drugs.
Thank you, Chief. You froze again. I don't know if you've completed your report or not. We'll wait a couple seconds. Okay. If there's any more from Chief, we can always go back to him. Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, sir. I believe we have our Finance Director, Richard Jude, who would like to just give a brief overview on the financial summary with respect to COVID impacts as it relates to the borough operations. Richard?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for Mayor and Council for giving me this opportunity to speak. I just wanted to give you, like Susan said, a brief overview with the knowledge that I'm currently working on our mid-year review with the hopes of having that to Council at the August meeting, and we can go over things in a little more detail then. But at this point, I just wanted to take a look back at the last several months and the impacts that COVID-19 has had on the borough, especially as it relates to our economy and the effects it has on us. Over the last several months, we've had some major decreases in revenues due to reduced programming and services, as well as due to the inability for some of our citizens and property owners to make payments on the utility bills and taxes. Some of the reduced programming, of course, is our recreation programming. At this point, we're at about 90,000 less than we were last year at this time. But as Susan said, you know, we're doing what we can now, and things are starting to turn around. But the likelihood of recovering that money is not there, not likely to happen. In addition, you know, with the economy slowing and the restrictions put in place, development has slowed, which has resulted in a large decrease in permits, licenses, and fees. And like I said, with high unemployment, we've seen about $100,000 less in utility payments, meaning not less use, but delays in payments on customers. So we have been sending out courtesy reminders because right now we're not terminating water, but we want to make sure that people are, if they're able to make payment to stay ahead of the game, that they're able to do so. We're also seeing a decrease in payments and taxes. At this point, the borough has about $200,000 less in taxes. 100,000 of that is real estate, which really would be a delay in revenues. But we're also at about 90,000 less in earned income tax. And whether or not that's, you know, employers taking their time to pay or truly the effects of unemployment, I suspect that's going to keep increasing. And if it is due to unemployment, that's revenue we won't be getting back. Right now, we're kind of at the about a month away from starting our budget, and that's, you know, all this is going to play into, you know, how we budget going forward, looking at the services that we offered compared to the funding that's available. And, you know, a lot of people are hurting at this point, so we have some tough decisions ahead of us on what we're going to be doing. But I look forward to answering any questions, as well as going into a little more detail for you next month.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions or comments for Joel?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thanks. Just, I guess as you're starting to look forward in the next fiscal year, planning year, it might be helpful just as you're probably going to have to make some assumptions, right? I mean, and it would be useful maybe to outline those ahead of time, just so we're understanding before we see numbers that these are assumptions you're going into. So that's maybe a tough thing to do, but that would help me wrap my head around where you're thinking. So thanks.
Absolutely, yeah, and like I said, this is going to be a tough one, and I think it's going to take a little more than just staff to make some decisions. So we'll be keeping council apprised throughout the whole process and getting your input as well.
And
Do you have numbers on parking?
for the people that are listening, oh, sorry, we got an echo. Sorry. All right, we got it. Could you just outline our budget process from now to the end of the year, so folks like the public understand like what the process is? We don't have our hearings usually till November, but there's a lot of work that's being done from now until then. Could you just give a quick little overview of that for everyone?
Sure. So we have a lot of budget managers that do their part on the budget, department heads as well as supervisors. So right now, what's happening is this week, actually, I'm sending out instructions to them to give them a refresher on what it is they should be looking at, as well as the process that they should follow. Starting mid-August, the borough manager, myself, and the department heads will be meeting individually to go over each line item that they have and budget recommendations that they have, and evaluating at that point, what we're capable of handling, if it's reasonable, making adjustments as needed at that point before it even gets to council. Just making sure that we're being as responsible as we can be. So that typically takes about a month, but we've budgeted a month and a half this time around, just because of the decisions that we have to make. After that, we start looking at, we start finalizing our revenue numbers and getting together the budget book, as well as making some decisions on or recommendations for council as to tax increases or rate increases. Along with all this, it's one of the harder parts is our capital budget, and just evaluating, what can we truly accomplish in this next budget year, and how are we going to finance that. But as you saw this year, a lot of our projects have been delayed, so that's going to be a big part of this coming budget, and I suspect a lot of things are going to be pushed off.
Richard, where are we on parking revenue?
Sure. Parking revenue has taken a large hit. At this point, we are showing well over $160,000 in losses. We don't have a whole lot of expenses in parking,
Sure.
and we're limiting what we do right now because of that. But with the absence of parking metered revenue, as well as parking enforcement, we are about over $160,000 lower than last year.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Richard? All right. Susan, back to you.
I believe that's everything that we wanted to cover right now under COVID. If we do plan to promote the information that Chief Snyder brought forward, we'll have that on social media as well by tomorrow. And again, encourage residents and businesses, if you have questions regarding the orders or compliance, you're welcome to contact us. We also have a link to the state where you can make inquiries, inquiries as well as complaints with respect to compliance issues. So we'll certainly plan, once again, like I said, to promote that information and educate people as much as possible on where we are.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Public safety, we have a staff update on Rockledge and Garland turning lane.
Good evening, everyone. I believe it was sometime last year that there was a resident that approached either staff or perhaps the mayor asking for a left-hand turning lane at the intersection of Garland and Rockledge Drive. That intersection is located south of Route 81 and between Walnut Bottom Road and South Hanover Street. It provides access to Second Presbyterian Church. The intersection is somewhat different than other intersections in the borough in that on the eastbound lane, the road width is approximately 36 feet wide, one lane in each direction with no parking. But on the east side, the intersection is 60 foot wide, and there exists a grass and also a striped apron that separates the eastbound from the westbound lanes. Staff went out and conducted a traffic study to try to ascertain the number of folks heading westbound that are actually making left turns into Rockledge. Unfortunately, because of the geometry of the intersection, the numbers we were getting really were not accurate. However, there is some pretty big demand there, especially on Sundays during the pre-COVID period when folks are going to services. UGI has been out on Garland for the last year and a half with their gas improvement project. They're now getting very close to finalizing that. They have also, as part of that project, they will be milling and overlaying those portions of the road where they've disturbed through their utility process. Their gas line meanders from the north side to the south side to the center of the road, all over the place. Staff has looked at this and wanted to bring it to council's attention to see whether there was any interest in having staff make changes to that intersection. What we were suggesting is that we do a two-step process. The first step would be to, once UGI goes through and completes the repaving, we would go in and restripe to eliminate about 60 feet of a striped median strip and convert that into a left-hand turning lane. We would then monitor the use of that because of the striping. We would have a better handle on being able to accurately measure the number of vehicles and determine whether or not that is of adequate width, or excuse me, adequate length. And if not, we would then come back to council with a recommendation to eliminate some of the grass median strip to provide additional queue length for folks wishing to make lefts onto Rockledge. So that in a nutshell is what the proposal is. Is there any opinions from council on whether we should proceed in that manner?
Thank you, Mark. Joel?
Any ideas of why the median strip was so large to begin with? I mean, was there a reason why it was sort of almost unfunctionally so large?
It was built many years ago, and the style at that time was for much wider roads. And Rockledge does meander. It's not a straight road by any stretch. Typically, there's not parking on that road, so it is much wider than it needs to be.
Any other questions? Brenda?
I think that your cautious approach is smart. I mean, if there is a section that's already paved, I don't think that would be a problem. I do have concerns about taking away green space for more cars, especially for the fact that I know that you said the counts were hard to get. I couldn't quite hear part of it in there, but it is for one day. That I understand that Sundays are the big day, but then the other days during 6 other days out of the week might not need that. So is it something that just needs to be kind of understood and accommodated because Sundays are just a busier day? So I do think that if there's already a partial, an area that's paved, I don't see that as an issue. But I like that little grassy strip. I think that it's quaint, and there's not many of them in the borough. And I will say that since Mark brought it up, since that road is overly wide, when we repave, can we make it thinner? Also, that saves budget, right? So it's less asphalt. And so those are things like that as we're evaluating and we're looking, Richard is talking about all of our issues. Those are, I know that won't save copious amounts of money, but over time, if we can write some of these, it was just built that way previously. Those are just some things I think that we should look at continually as we work on some of these projects.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Any other comments on this? Deb?
Just a quick question. Has there been a safety issue with this intersection? I don't remember ever hearing that it was an issue about safety as opposed to convenience.
I believe it's more of an issue of convenience and the amount of time that someone's waiting to make a turn. We did look at accident reports, and there really wasn't anything there to show that.
If memory serves me correctly, it was the convenience of the person that either approached me or approached staff. I can't remember. So it was more about convenience. Is anyone opposed to the two-step process as outlined by Mark? Okay, so I believe, Mark, you've got your direction. All right, thank you, sir. All right, moving on, community planning and smart growth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 items tonight. The first is a update on a land development plan for a 7-Eleven project on South Hanover. So I'm going to kick that to Mike, I believe.
Good evening, all. So the borough is quite fortunate to get the, I guess, people at 7-Eleven to invest in the borough. For the last 8 to 9 months, we've been entertaining initial sketch plans, discussions about traffic. Recently, we had a zoning hearing board with regards to a couple design issues they had. And what you see tonight in terms of on the agenda is the pending final land development plan. So Mark and I had a look at it. There's really no substantive issues. I think because over the last 9 months, we were kind of cleaning it up. The PennDOT has been involved for a good probably 5 months in terms of looking at traffic transportation issues. That's underway. And at this point, staff is satisfied with what we see, and we're providing a report with conditions of approval.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks for that. And I'll just add, I thought the Planning Commission did a great job asking a lot of questions on that. And Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Did they change the impervious surface? Initially, I think it was higher, and did they accommodate that? Or do you have any response to what they said about that? I think they were trying to work to get more greenery or at least more drainage on the property.
You're correct. So through the work of the designer, and again, it's not so much in terms of prompting by staff, it's just in terms of making everything fit. So what they're actually proposing is a net decrease by about 2,500 square feet for what you see on the plan. That will actually be made up by some additional screening on the perimeter, definitely on the south side. So you're absolutely right. There was an improvement for impervious stormwater works. Obviously, you can see conditions on the report, and we'll get some additional new landscaping for that property.
Awesome, great. And I think the other thing that they addressed at the Planning Commission, it is going to be a 24-hour operation, but the lighting seemed low enough that it would not impact those neighbors across the street. Is that how staff felt as well?
Correct. So how the, I guess, design engineers look at it, they devise in terms of foot candles. So along the periphery, you'll have a maximum of 1.9, which is well below and typically what we would be concerned about for adjacent residential areas. I think obviously with a gas station, you do have a large canopy which radiates a decent amount of, sometimes people talk about light pollution, and definitely for the last 20 years for dark skies initiatives. But I think in this case, they're being sympathetic.
Awesome. Any other questions from council? Yep, Brenda, go ahead.
Sorry, we got some earbud problems here, so I have to actually use my regular mic. So it's good to hear about the 25 square foot impervious, but I love to talk about parking spots. So I'm going to do it tonight too. I took a look, and I understand that we are looking at one plot, but I think the thing that I always look at is what is it touching? And it is touching because I looked at Google Maps and I did a quick number. I don't want to say this accurate, but Home Depot has 585 parking spaces right next to this plot. So it only says 21 spaces that are going to be built on this. And I see, I think there are maybe 12 right along the storefront. Makes sense, right? 12. But I think it's positioned in the southeast corner of that plot, not so where the other building is, it's a little bit farther towards the road. So it's right up against the Home Depot parking lot. And along this one side, there are 14 spots right on the other side of the lot line. So one, I guess I can't tell if there is only one ingress and egress, right? Coming right in off of the road, or if there is access from the Home Depot parking lot. We've done shared parking with the urban redevelopment mixed use, I believe. So, but there are places in town, for instance, if I go to the Dollar Tree and I want to go next door to the restaurant, I actually have to pull out, go back in, because there are no, there are places like this where we have these lot lines. And I understand it's private property, but I think that these are opportunities, and I don't know what kind of opportunity we have as a municipality, but is this the way that we want to continue to build? We already have 585 mostly unused parking spaces adjacent to it. So what I'm asking is there's that 12, but the other ones that are along the other side, I personally just didn't, I see that as excessive when you're looking at the greater, where this particular space is positioned. And so I don't know what kind of options we as a borough have or as a council have in making these changes. And if we don't, if our hands are tied by our zoning, how can we look at areas and what they're attached to, not just as the land development plan itself, because it really does make, if you look at it in context of 585 other parking spaces, 21 just in my mind just screams why. So I guess I'm asking, is there any option other than what we have on the 21 parking spaces? Is there any option to work with Home Depot to allow some like other access point from that point, so that it would have additional parking spaces that are not being used?
Sure. So I guess the answer, briefly could be yes. From a practical standpoint, patrons could park adjacently and use it. And again, there's definitely ample excess parking. With regards to this particular lot, there's two, I would say, prevalent, preconditions that they're dealing with. So with regards to the redevelopment of this particular site, there is a grade differential with regards to doing that. So that was, and again, that was made known to the people at 7-Eleven from the get-go in terms of, could we consider, even just in terms of accessibility for this. For me, and again, I don't know, and I wasn't here when they had the Home Depot, but my experience in other similar situations is when you deal with what I call these orphan sites, and especially when they're smaller, less than 1 acre, it's difficult to kind of integrate it after the fact. So when we look at, let's say, good urban design or good integration, I suspect at one point the property owner didn't get the market value he probably wanted to for that site, and hence Home Depot just built around it. So after the fact, and especially when you do have grade issues, it's kind of difficult to kind of provide that. But to me, it's a matter of, when you get a decent kick at the can. And because that site was, as I said, orphaned, at this point, it was difficult to kind of provide that sort of design option. So if there's anything I missed, obviously Mark's on, I saw it pop up. So if he has any additional things to add.
I would just say that that was the first thing we brought up with the engineer and the developer, is that they should approach Home Depot and try to work things out. They came back to us and said the grade differential was such that in order to provide it, they would have a loss of use of their site, and also a loss of some use of Home Depot's as well. There's also the issue with trying to maintain the stormwater that's generated on the the gasoline distribution facility within site so that it could be treated before it's discharged, as opposed to flowing over and getting into Home Depot's property. Those are two issues I think that precluded that.
Thank you. I appreciate that you did ask that, and I did not know that, but I think that that's just the continual question I will continue to ask. And I know, I understand that there are different rationales, and I can understand the grade differential and the orphan site, but anything else that we can do to continue to look at where things are placed and what is adjacent and how we can best integrate that, and anything that we as council can do to help that for future development before we're at the land development process. I'm happy to get on board, you know that.
All right. And then anything else from council? I just had one more thing to add. And Mark, I know this came up at the Planning Commission, but there was a little bit of a discussion around pedestrians crossing over Hanover. Obviously, it's going to be a gas station, so it'll be heavy car traffic. But for those folks that are walking or riding their bikes to the venue, is that light something that we're going to monitor just to ensure folks have enough time to get across Hanover Street?
So there is a pedestrian crosswalk on the north side of Garland. That intersection is a part of it's the last light in the adaptive system. So to answer your question, yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and then the next item I had, Mr. Mayor, was a staff update on certified local government master contract.
So the second item you have in front of you is essentially what I would call a housekeeping matter from the state. So we are part of the certified local government program recognized with our historic district. So the report and the accompanying documents, and especially I think there's a good, 12 or so pages, essentially what the state is doing is providing for a more convenient, expedited process. So at this point, once we sign this document, for any future kind of grants or loans, we won't have to reapply under a separate agreement. This will be covered under at least the umbrella document. So essentially it's for our benefit. So I'd encourage you to have us sign it and we can send it off to the state.
Great, that sounds like it makes sense. Any comments or questions from council? And then is this an item you'd like us to take action on next week?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, great. Then that ends my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Crampsey. Employee relations, citizen participation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have an action or a discussion item tonight related to the Climate Action Plan Committee and the rules and responsibilities of that committee. I'm going to turn things over to Councilor Hicks to kick off our discussion on that.
Thank you, Councilor Stubbe. Yeah, I just wanted to update council on the progress moving forward and getting a commission together. So, as you may have remembered, last time we met, we agreed on a structure for the commission. The next phase of that was to have the Planning Commission chair, selected chair for the commission, leaving some discretion to them, how they wanted to go about it. No surprise, they wanted to advertise and get the input of all the Planning Commission and requested that we update them on the resolution and a little bit more on the structure of the Climate Action Commission, which Councilor Crampsey and I did, basically outlining that this consists of a chair, which was the responsibility of the Planning Commission defined, of which the chair himself, working with Borough, would then fill out the balance of the commission, including selecting the team leads. And I think we all were sort of suspecting there would probably be some team leads led by borough staff themselves. So the actual selection of additional leads will probably not be that great once we get a chair selected. And so we updated the commission, and actually unsolicited, but much to my joy, they took up a motion to endorse the climate action plan process and the commission, and they unanimously said it was something that they in fact supported and look forward to being part of. And they requested that we at least give them, if we had one, a draft position description that they were free to update, taking a little bit direction from us on the timeline. I think initially we were looking at trying to have a commission stood up by 8 July. And when I say a commission stood up, that means having a chair and the 14 leads selected. I think based on the fact that the Planning Commission decided to sort of deliberately go through a selection process and really started about 2 weeks after our council meeting, we agreed that giving them a reasonable amount of time to select a chair would be desirable. And so looking at 14 July as a goal for selecting a chair. As of right now, and maybe somebody has an update, a description has been sent to the Planning Commission that upon their mutual approval would then get advertised. Nothing on there you probably wouldn't figure out on your own. I will highlight that we will look at having a chair outside the borough, but the preference would be to have a chair that lives within the borough. I think we all kind of came to an agreement that, in terms of time commitments, probably candidates should probably expect between 8 and 10 hours a week through the 12-month period that we're going to be finishing the climate action plan. So that's the update. I would expect the Planning Commission will probably be ready to advertise that on our website. So probably expect to see that in the next couple days. Any questions? That's all I had, Councilor Stubbe.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, will conclude my report for the committee.
Thank you, Councilor Stubbe. Public Works.
Just needed to unmute there. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We have two staff updates tonight. The first is on the Tiger project.
Okay, I'll go into that. The construction on the Tiger project started the middle of June, and it involves the installation of water mains first. The borough has some very old and very small water mains along B Street, and part of the contract involves replacing those with larger and newer mains. The contractor started that and is moving to the east. His progress is somewhat slow because of rock that's been encountered, as we expected, but nevertheless, he's proceeding. The actual construction of the road improvements will take place after water main installation is completed in a certain stretch of road. So the contractor currently anticipates that starting either next week or the following week, they will be working on storm water piping in the section of B Street from Factory to West. And once that's done, then they'll go in and work on curbing and sidewalks in that area. We have had one draw submitted to date for payment by the contractor. It amounts to about 3% of the overall construction cost, and it reflects construction that's been completed to date and also preparatory work and ancillary work related to the construction. I believe in your meeting packet there's a table that shows you the budget status for the Tiger project and also the timeline. Contract notice to proceed was the beginning of February, so and it goes through October of 2021. So we've consumed about 20%, a little over 20% of the overall timeline. However, he's only done about 3% of the overall construction due to COVID and other matters. So the contractor will be working to try to catch up. As far as traffic control goes, they do close the road during the workday, but reopen it at nighttime to allow for folks to access their properties. And whenever they're working in the intersections, for instance, they were at the intersection of West and B Street, they do have a flagger force crew out, and they direct traffic to make sure that there's no accidents that are going to occur. So that's a very brief update on the status of Tiger. We expect that over the next several months, we'll be seeing a lot of activity in that area.
Mark, so far, have the residents been okay with this disruption to their daily schedules?
They've been understanding.
Good.
We've gotten little negative comments to date.
Well, as long as I just communicate, as long as people are communicating with us, that's helpful. So that's great. Okay, and now moving on to the, I assume, Mark, you're also on for the brake retarder ordinance update?
Yes, so borough staff received some complaints and a request from residents that live along South Spring Garden Street. South Spring Garden Street is just north of Union Quarries, and there is a lot of dump trucks, diesel trucks going to and from the quarry, and a lot of those trucks are equipped with what are referred to as engine retarding devices, or colloquially known as Jake brakes. And those, when they are activated, can give off some pretty loud noises and be very disruptive. So the resident asked if council would consider implementing a prohibition against the use of those brakes along that road. Back in 2012, the police department had approached PennDOT about securing approval from PennDOT to allow the borough to implement an ordinance prohibiting the use of engine retarder brakes on all state roads within the borough. And PennDOT did give the police department their approval, and council did take action in June 2013 to enact an ordinance prohibiting the use of engine brake retarding devices on state highways in the borough. However, there was no action taken at that time regarding prohibitions of this device on local borough streets. Under the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code, it does require PennDOT to give its written approval to a local municipality if the local municipality is interested in implementing such a prohibition. PennDOT has prepared a manual on that, and has a 3-page form that they require local municipalities to complete, documenting the need for each of the roads, each of the road segments that they wish to seek approval from PennDOT on before any prohibition is granted. So I believe that it's staff's recommendation that council does consider a prohibition against the use of engine brake retarding devices on South Spring Garden Street, on Spring Garden Street, because Spring Garden Street is such a heavily traveled route for diesel truck traffic. And if you have other roads that you're aware of where there is a heavy amount of truck traffic that you would like us to look at and petition PennDOT on, we certainly can do that as well. In looking at this, one of the roads that we are suggesting is B Street, because of the connectivity project and the fact that Route 74 then will merge into B Street.
That makes good sense. Have we had complaints from other residents in other areas, or is it primarily the Spring Garden Street?
Spring Garden Street has been the only one that I've had anyone raise this issue since I've been with the borough.
Okay. So would this be to take action tonight, or would this be for action next week?
Well, this would be seeking direction from council on whether we should proceed with the studies needed to submit to PennDOT.
Given that Spring Garden Street is only going to get busier, given the construction that's happening on the Smith Farm lot, I would think we would want the study to be done so that we could move forward on this.
Brenda?
I was just wondering if North, since it's coming in from the barracks and post roads out there, if that has any factor on truck traffic at all. If that was evaluated or not, obviously specifically that side of North Street.
Right. So that's why I corrected myself and said Spring Garden Street, the entire road. North Street from Hanover to Borough border is a PennDOT road. So we currently have a prohibition there now.
Okay. So I would assume that it sounds like we would recommend that you move forward with the study on Spring Garden. Is there anyone who would think that's not what we want to do? So it sounds like we would like to do that.
Any other suggestions for other streets that you've perhaps had, residents raise this issue on?
I haven't heard of any others. I don't know if anyone else has.
I don't think we have at the staff level, but I know that Mark and another staff person, Rick Friedman, as you're well aware, is our traffic engineer. He and Mark, I think you had it documented that there were several other areas that you thought we should look at, Mark. Was that correct? As far as K Street possibly? I don't know. Is that one that you still are entertaining? As well as West and East Street?
Those were ones that we suggested may be added to that list. We really haven't done any detailed evaluation on the number of truck traffic in that area, but we would do that as part of any study.
I mean, anything that makes our neighborhoods more pleasant for people to be, for the residents of those neighborhoods, seems like something worth exploring.
To that, Deb, I did a little bit of research on train horns.
Oh, good luck with that. That means talking to Norfolk Southern.
Well, the federal regulations actually say that when a train approaches a cross street where there's a sign, they have to do 2 long blasts, a short blast, and a long blast. And then in the regulation, it actually says the length of a blast is undetermined. So So like I can actually tell you like almost which engineer is coming each day by how their blasts go. But Jeff and anybody who lives in this area, man, I'm all all for public safety, but man, some of those horn blasts seem a little bit excessive.
Yeah, my son lived on West North Street for a couple of years, right near where the intersection is, and he said the same thing, that there were times that it seemed to just go on forever.
Yeah.
But I don't know how, I think that's Norfolk Southern. I don't know that we have any control over that.
Well, it's federal regulation, so we'd have to contact, who would that be? The Transportation Safety Division, federal government, Scott Perry's office. I don't know.
I have no idea where we'd even start with that. Mark, would you have any idea where we'd start?
I believe the U.S. Department of Transportation, but it would likely be through our local senator and representative as a start.
Okay.
Nothing says, Joel, there's nothing that says we can't send a letter to Scott Perry, Senator Toomey, Senator Casey, and ask them to effect some relief for us.
Thank you, Mr. I don't know if anyone thinks it might be useful to just get some input from the community. I don't know if what the best way would be to solicit how distracting or how much other residents would want to chime in on looking into this. But I suspect that this is probably something that does affect people's lives, and maybe we should think about how to get input for that.
Yeah, hopefully, can staff put something together on this? Maybe a survey through our social media might help, because I know a couple of years ago there was a discussion about this on Facebook. I remember seeing it because I was tagged in it. So I think the issue is definitely out there, and anybody who lives in that neighborhood will tell you it is very annoying.
It's loud.
Yeah, I hear it, and I live in the center of town, and I hear it.
I've only been here about 3.5 years, and I think it's getting worse in terms of the, and I don't know why, but yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Unless Mark has something else, that completes my report.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We are at the point where I say we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.